Emma rushed to the smoking wreckage, her dog straining at the leash. When she pulled the unconscious elderly man from the car, her world stopped glinting on his finger. Was her mother's distinctive rose-engraved wedding ring, stolen the night she died 3 years ago. The gold band caught the morning light, its familiar pattern of intertwined roses unmistakable, even through the smudges of blood. Emma's hands trembled as she checked the man's pulse, her mind racing with impossible questions. This was no coincidence. This was the precious heirloom that had disappeared from her mother's hospital room. The final piece of her mother she thought was lost forever. As sirens wailed in the distance, Emma quickly snapped a photo of the ring before continuing first aid, her heart pounding with equal measures of duty and disbelief. How could this stranger be wearing the most precious heirloom her family had ever lost? The paramedics loaded the elderly man into the ambulance as Emma stood back, clutching Scout's leash with white knuckles. She couldn't shake the image of that ring, her mother's ring, from her mind. "Are you coming with him, miss?" one of the EMTs asked, assuming she knew the victim. "No, I'll follow you to the hospital," Emma heard herself say, the words coming before she'd even made a conscious decision. As the ambulance pulled away, Emma knelt beside Scout, burying her face in the retriever's golden fur. "What do we do now, boy?" she whispered. 3 years ago, Emma had sat beside her mother's hospital bed, holding her frail hand adorned with that same rose-engraved ring. The gold band had been in their family for 4 generations, passed down from mother to daughter. "One day it'll be yours," her mother had whispered during those final days, her voice thin but determined. "When I'm gone, keep it close. It's not just gold, it's our history." But the morning after her mother passed, when Emma returned to collect her personal effects, the ring was gone. The hospital staff had no explanation. Security footage showed nothing suspicious. The police filed a report but warned her that hospital thefts were difficult to solve. People often take advantage during times of grief, the officer had said, with practiced sympathy. Emma had been devastated. The loss of her mother had left a gaping hole in her life, and the missing ring felt like losing her all over again. Final connection, stolen. She'd spent months checking pawnshops, online marketplaces, and jewelry stores. She'd printed flyers offering a reward. No questions asked. Nothing had ever come of it. Now, 3 years later, there it was, on the finger of a stranger who'd crashed his car on her morning dog-walking route. "Come on, Scout," Emma said, standing up with renewed purpose. "We've got somewhere to be." She loaded Scout into her small Honda and followed the route to Memorial Hospital. Each mile, her mind raced through possibilities. Had this man stolen the ring himself? Had he bought it from someone, unaware of its origins? Was there any chance this was all a bizarre coincidence, that it wasn't her mother's ring at all? Just something similar? No, she knew those roses, knew the unique pattern her great-grandfather had personally designed for his bride in 1923. There was no mistaking it. At a red light, Emma pulled up the photo she'd taken of the man's hand and zoomed in. The distinctive notch in one of the razzies, small imperfection from when her grandmother had accidentally dropped it on a stone floor, was clearly visible. This was her mother's ring. The question was, why did this elderly man have it? As she pulled into the hospital parking lot, Emma felt the weight of grief rise up again. These buildings held her last memories of her mother. Catherine Parker had spent her final weeks in this same hospital, fighting cancer with a grace that still left Emma in awe. Her mother had been her rock, her compass. A high school English teacher beloved by generations of students, Catherine had raised Emma alone after her father abandoned them when Emma was just 3. They'd been a team of 2 against the world. "You have her strength," people often told Emma at the funeral. But Emma hadn't felt strong. She'd felt adrift. Now, sitting in the hospital parking lot, Emma made a decision. She took out her phone and called the one person who might understand what she was feeling. "Grandma, it's me. I think I found Mom's ring." Her voice cracked. "And you're not going to believe what..." Emma sat in the hospital waiting room, Scout lying patiently at her feet. She'd convinced the front desk that she was the one who'd called 911 for the accident victim, and wanted to check on his condition. "It wasn't entirely a lie, Miss Parker." A doctor with kind eyes and a nameplate reading Dr. Layla Chen approached. "You're here from Mr. Harmon. Gerald Harmon, is that his name?" Emma asked, standing up. Dr. Chen nodded. "He's stabilized. The crash caused a concussion and some lacerations, but thankfully no internal bleeding." "Are you family?" Emma hesitated. "No, I was just there when it happened." "Is his family coming?" We've contacted his daughter. She's on her way. Dr. Chen studied Emma curiously. It was good of you to follow up. Not everyone would. Is he conscious? Emma asked, trying to sound casual. I'd like to make sure he's okay. He's drifting in and out. The medication makes him a bit confused. Dr. Chen checked her watch. You can see him briefly if you'd like. Just don't expect much conversation. Emma followed Dr. Chen down the sterile hallway, Scout padding obediently alongside her. The doctor raised an eyebrow at the dog but didn't object. We sometimes allow therapy dogs, she explained with a small smile, as long as you keep him close. They stopped outside room 342. 5 minutes, Dr. Chen said. I'll be at the nurse's station if you need anything. Inside, Gerald Harmon lay, against white pillows, looking smaller and frailer than he had in the wreckage. Anne, the fourth, dripped steadily beside him. His left hand, the one with the ring, rested on top of the blanket. Emma approached slowly, her heart pounding. Up close, there was no doubt, it was her mother's ring. She pulled out her phone and quietly took another photo, making sure to capture the distinctive rose pattern clearly. Who's there? The man's voice was raspy but strong. Emma quickly pocketed her phone. Mr. Harmon. Emma. I was there when you had your accident. His eyes, pale blue and clouded with age, struggled to focus on her. The girl with the dog. Yes, Emma said. Surprised, he remembered. This is Scout. Gerald's gaze drifted to her face, then narrowed slightly. You look familiar. Emma's breath caught. Did he recognize her? Had he known her mother? I don't think we've met before, she said carefully. His attention shifted to Scout, who had approached the bed and was resting his chin on the mattress near Gerald's hand. Good dog, Gerald murmured, reaching out to pet Scout. The ring glinted under the harsh hospital lights. Emma couldn't help herself. That's a beautiful ring you're wearing. Gerald looked down at his hand as if surprised to find the ring there. His expression softened. It was Margaret's voice held such tenderness that Emma was momentarily taken aback. Margaret? She asked. My wife, he said. Been gone 5 years now. Emma felt her certainty waver. The ring had been on her mother's finger 3 years ago. If his wife had been gone for 5 years, it's unusual, she pressed. The rose design, Gerald nodded slowly, one of a kind. His eyes were growing heavy again, the medication pulling him back toward sleep. Emma needed to know more, but Gerald was fading. Mr. Harmon, Dad. A sharp voice cut through the room. Emma turned to see a woman, about her mother's age, standing in the doorway. She had Gerald's pale blue eyes and an expression of suspicious concern. What are you doing in here? Who are you? The woman moved quickly to Gerald's bedside, positioning herself between him and Emma. I'm Emma Parker. I was there when your father had his accident, and you followed him to the hospital. The woman's tone made it clear how strange she found this. I wanted to make sure he was okay. Emma felt Scout pressed against her leg. Sensing her discomfort, the woman looked from Emma to her father, who had drifted back to sleep. Thank you for your help, but we've got it from here. Emma knew she was being dismissed. She had so many questions, but this wasn't the time to ask them. Of course, I hope he recovers quickly. She turned to leave, Scout at her heels. Wait, the woman's voice stopped her. Parker, did you say? Emma nodded, like Catherine Parker. There was something in her tone that Emma couldn't identify. She was my mother, Emma said, watching the woman's face carefully. Something flashed in the woman's eyes, recognition, then wariness. I'm Catherine Harmon. I think you should go now. As Emma walked back to the waiting area, her mind was spinning. Catherine had recognized her mother's name. Gerald had said the ring belonged to his wife, who'd been dead for 5 years. Yet Emma absolutely knew that the ring had been on her mother's finger 3 years ago. The story wasn't adding up, and Emma was more determined than ever to uncover the truth. Emma returned to the hospital the next day without Scout. She'd spent a restless night looking through old photos of her mother wearing the ring, confirming what she already knew. It was the same one. She needed answers, and waiting for Gerald Harmon to recover enough for a proper conversation seemed like torture. She was surprised to find him sitting up in bed when she entered his room, looking considerably more alert than yesterday. Mr. Harmon, it's Emma, from yesterday. Recognition lit his weathered face. The dog girl. Where's your companion today? Home hospital rules, she said, approaching cautiously. How are you feeling? Like I drove my car into a tree. He chuckled, then winced. They tell me you helped pull me out. Thank you. Emma nodded, unsure how to broach the subject of the ring. She noticed it was still on his finger. Please, sit. Gerald gestured to the chair beside the bed. Catherine mentioned you were here yesterday, said your name is Parker. Emma sat down, studying his face for any sign of deception. Yes, Emma Parker. Gerald's eyes clearer today held hers steadily. Catherine's daughter. The direct question caught her off guard. You knew my mother. A shadow passed across Gerald's face. Yes, many years ago. He twisted the ring on his finger absently. Emma's gaze followed the movement. That ring. Gerald looked down at his hand. Ah, you noticed it yesterday too. It looks exactly like my mother's ring. The one that disappeared when she died 3 years ago. The silence that followed was heavy. Gerald's expression shifted from surprise to something more complex, guilt, perhaps, or sorrow. 3 years, he repeated softly. Has it been that long? Emma felt her chest tighten. You know something about it. Gerald sighed deeply. I didn't steal it. If that's what you're thinking, then how did you get it? Emma demanded, her voice rising slightly. That ring was on her finger the night before she died. The next morning, it was gone, and now here it is, on your hand. What am I supposed to think? It's complicated, Gerald said, his eyes suddenly tired. Did you know my mother was dying? Did you take advantage? I would never, Gerald interrupted, a flash of anger in his voice. Catherine was. He paused, seeming to search for the right word. Important to me. Before Emma could press further, the door opened and Catherine entered, carrying a small duffel bag. She stopped short at the sight of Emma. You again, she said, her voice cool. Dad, are you up for visitors? The doctor said you should rest. Emma isn't just a visitor, Katie, Gerald said. She's Catherine Parker's daughter. Catherine's expression shifted subtly. I see. She set down the bag and turned to Emma. I think my father needs his rest now. We were in the middle of a conversation, Emma said firmly. About a ring, Catherine replied. I heard, and I think this isn't the time or place, Gerald coughed, drawing their attention. Katie, please. Emma deserves answers. And she'll get them, Catherine said, her tone softening slightly. But you just had a serious accident. Your blood pressure is fine, Gerald finished. He turned to Emma. Your mother's ring. Yes, this is it. And no, I didn't steal it. Dad, Catherine warned. Gerald ignored her. Catherine gave it to me. Emma stared at him in disbelief. That's impossible. She would never. She did, Gerald insisted, the night before she passed. I was there. Emma shook her head. I was with her every day. I never saw you. You were asleep in the chair, Gerald said quietly. It was very late. I came after visiting hours, and the night nurse, an old friend, let me in for a few minutes. Emma remembered waking up stiff and cold in the hospital chair. Her mother, looking peaceful in the dim light of early morning. Had someone been there while she slept? Why would she give you her most precious possession? Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Gerald's eyes grew distant. Because once, a very long time ago, I gave it to her. Catherine made a small noise of protest. Gerald looked at his daughter with a sad smile. It's time for the truth, Katie. I'm too old and apparently too fragile to keep carrying these secrets. Emma looked between father and daughter, feeling like she was missing vital pieces of a puzzle. What are you saying? Gerald took a deep breath. That ring belonged to my mother. I gave it to Catherine in 1974. She returned it to me before she died, she said. ... double quotes, his voice faltered. She said it was always meant to be mine. Emma felt the room spin slightly. That's not possible. That ring has been in my family for generations. My great-grandfather designed it himself. Albert Parker. Gerald nodded. Yes, he did. For his wife Eliza, my grandmother. Emma stood up abruptly. You're saying we're related? Gerald exchanged a look with Catherine. Not exactly, he said carefully. Emma, there's something about your mother and me that you should know. Emma left the hospital in a daze. Gerald's nurse had interrupted before he could explain further, insisting he needed rest. Catherine had taken Emma's number, promising they would talk soon, but Emma felt too unsettled to wait passively for answers. Back home in her small apartment, she sat cross-legged on her bed with her laptop, Scout curled beside her. Gerald Harmon. Who was he really? And what connection did he have to her mother? Her first search yielded numerous results. Gerald Harmon was well known in the community, a retired jeweler who had owned Harmon Fine Jewelry for over 40 years before passing the business to his daughter. There were articles about charity auctions he'd organized, interviews about custom pieces he'd designed for local celebrities. Even a feature in the city magazine about his collection of historical jewelry. In every photo, he appeared distinguished and confident, with no hint of the frailty she'd seen in the hospital. In some, Catherine stood beside him, looking proud and protective. Emma dug deeper. Gerald had been married to Margaret Harmon for 47 years until her death 5 years ago. They had one daughter, Catherine, born in 1976. Emma paused, calculating. If Gerald claimed to have given the ring to her mother in 1974, that was before his daughter was born, but well after her own mother's birth in 1958, so they weren't talking about some secret parental relationship. She found an obituary for Margaret Harmon with a photo of an elegant woman with Catherine's features and Gerald's kind eyes. The list of surviving family mentioned Gerald and Catherine, several nieces and nephews, but no connection to the Parker family. Next, Emma searched for her mother's name alongside Gerald's. Nothing significant appeared. Frustrated, she picked up her phone and called the one person who might have answers. "Michael, it's Emma. I need your help with something." Michael Santos had been her friend since high school and was now a detective with the city police. More importantly, he'd known her mother well. Catherine had been his English teacher. And later, when Michael was in college and Catherine was department chair, she'd hired him to do maintenance around their house. They met at a coffee shop near the precinct. An hour later, Emma had brought the photos of the ring on Gerald's finger. "This is a long shot," Michael warned, examining the images. "The theft report was filed 3 years ago with minimal evidence. Even if this is the same ring, proving it was stolen would be nearly impossible." "I don't think it was stolen, at least, not how we thought," Emma admitted. "He says my mother gave it to him." Michael raised his eyebrows. "And you believe him?" "I don't know what to believe. He knew things about my great-grandfather designing it, about my mother. He says he gave her the ring in 1974. That's bizarre," Michael said, frowning. "Your mom always said it was passed down through generations of women in your family." "Exactly." Emma stirred her untouched coffee. "He's hiding something, and his daughter seems to know what it is." Michael studied the hospital photo again. "Gerald Harmon. Why does that name sound familiar?" He pulled out his phone and did a quick search. "Wait, the jeweler. Harmon, fine jewelry, on Westbrook Avenue." Emma nodded. "You know him?" "Not personally, but the store has a great reputation. Never any complaints or suspicious activity." Michael hesitated. "Emma, if your mother did give him the ring, it's not a police matter. It would be a civil dispute at most." "I'm not looking to press charges," Emma said. "I just want to understand. This ring was supposed to come to me. My mother told me so. Why would she give it to him instead?" Michael gave her a sympathetic look. "People sometimes make unexpected decisions near the end. Maybe there's a connection you don't know about." "That's what I'm afraid of," Emma admitted. "What if everything I thought I knew about my mother was wrong?" Michael reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Catherine Parker was one of the most honest, straightforward people I've ever known. Whatever the explanation is, I'm sure she had good reasons. Will you help me? Just ... keep an ear out, maybe check if there's anything in the system about Gerald that might explain this." Michael looked uncomfortable. "Emma, I can't use police resources for personal matters." "I'm not asking you to run a background check," Emma clarified. "Just, if you happen to hear anything relevant." After a moment, he nodded. "I'll see what I can find out through legitimate channels. But Emma, be careful. If you're wrong about this guy, if he did steal the ring, somehow confronting him could be dangerous. He's a 72-year-old man recovering from a car accident," Emma said. "Who may or may not have stolen from a dying woman," Michael countered. "Just promise me you'll be careful." As they parted ways, Emma felt a new resolve. Michael was right about one thing: her mother had been honest and straightforward. If she had given Gerald the ring, there must have been a compelling reason, and Emma was determined to find out what it was. Monday morning found Emma back at her job at the Westside Community Center, where she ran programs for at-risk youth. The weekend's events swirled in her mind as she set up for the day's activities, barely hearing the cheerful chatter of her coworkers. "Earth to Emma," said Jamal, the center's director, waving a hand in front of her face. "You've been staring at that same flyer for 5 minutes." Emma blinked. "Sorry, weird weekend. Everything okay?" "Yeah, just ... She hesitated. How could she possibly explain? "Family stuff." Jamal nodded understandingly. "Well, snap out of it by 11. The donation drop-off is happening, and I need you to help coordinate. The community center survived largely on donations, everything from school supplies to sports equipment to clothing for their youth programs. Local businesses contributed regularly, but they were always struggling to meet needs. Emma spent the morning teaching an art class to elementary school kids, grateful for the distraction. Her mother had been the one to encourage her interest in art therapy, pointing out how Emma's own sketching had helped her through the difficult years after her father left. Catherine had been an unwavering source of strength and wisdom. The idea that she'd kept secrets, significant ones, from her only daughter felt like a betrayal. At 11, Emma was stationed in the center's loading area, clipboard in hand, when a silver Mercedes pulled up. She watched in surprise as Catherine Harmon stepped out, opened her trunk, and began unloading several large shopping bags. Need some help? Emma offered, approaching cautiously. Catherine looked up, her expression shifting from neutral to recognition to wariness in quick succession. Emma Parker. That's me, Emma confirmed. I didn't expect to see you here. Catherine handed her a heavy bag. I've been donating to the center for years. Art supplies, mostly. I own a gallery downtown. Emma peeked into the bag. High-quality sketchbooks, professional colored pencils, and watercolor sets. These weren't typical donations. They were premium supplies. This is incredibly generous, Emma said, genuinely impressed. Catherine shrugged. Art saved me when I was young. I like knowing it might do the same for these kids. She studied Emma curiously. You work here? Program coordinator for the youth services, Emma confirmed. 3 years now. A flicker of something recognition, perhaps, crossed Catherine's face. 3 years. Right after your mother passed. Emma nodded, surprised that Catherine knew this detail. She was the one who suggested I apply. She volunteered here sometimes, teaching creative writing. I know, Catherine said quietly. I met her once, at a fundraiser for the center. They finished unloading in silence, the weight of unspoken questions hanging between them. As Catherine prepared to leave, Emma found her courage. Has your father said anything more about the ring? Catherine's shoulders tensed. He's being discharged tomorrow. I've convinced him to stay with me for a few days. She hesitated. Look, this is complicated. There's history here that goes back decades. I gathered that much, Emma said. But it's my family history too. I deserve to know. Catherine sighed, glancing at her watch. I have a meeting in 20 minutes, but ... She seemed to come to a decision. Are you free tomorrow evening? You could come by my place. My father will be there, and we can sort this out properly. Emma nodded quickly. Yes, absolutely. Catherine took out a business card and scribbled an address on the back. 7 o'clock, and Emma. Come alone. No police friends. Emma felt her cheeks flush. How did you? Detective Santos stopped by the hospital yesterday with some very transparent questions about my father, Catherine said dryly. Subtle. He is not. He's just looking out for me, Emma defended. I understand, Catherine said, her tone softening slightly. But this is a family matter, not a criminal one. After Catherine left, Emma stared at the card in her hand. Harmon Gallery, it read, with Catherine listed as owner and curator. The address on the back was in Oakwood Heights, an upscale neighborhood of renovated Victorian homes. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Emma found herself thinking about Catherine's comment. Art saved me when I was young. What had Catherine needed saving from? Her parents had stayed married for nearly 50 years. By all accounts happily. She'd grown up with money, privilege, opportunities. What darkness lurked in her past that made her connect so deeply with the center's mission? That evening, Emma sat on her small balcony with Scout, flipping through old photo albums. Her mother smiled back at her from countless images. Catherine at Emma's high school graduation, beaming with pride. Catherine in her classroom, surrounded by admiring students. Catherine in the garden she'd loved, dirt on her cheeks and the famous ring glinting on her finger. In all the photos, she looked happy, fulfilled. There was nothing to suggest she harbored painful secrets or complicated relationships, but there was one odd detail Emma had never paid much attention to before. In nearly every photo where the ring was visible, Catherine was touching it, twisting it, holding it, or pressing her thumb against it as if it were a talisman, not like a treasured family heirloom, but like a bittersweet reminder of something or someone lost. Emma closed the album, suddenly certain that whatever Gerald Harmon revealed tomorrow would change everything she thought she knew about her mother. The question was she ready for the truth? Before meeting with the Harmons, Emma decided to visit her grandmother. If anyone knew the truth about her mother's past, it would be Eleanor Parker. Eleanor lived in a small cottage on the outskirts of town, where she tended an impressive garden and hosted a weekly book club. At 78, she remained sharp and independent, though Emma had noticed her growing more wistful since Catherine's death. Eleanor greeted her with a warm hug. "What a lovely surprise. Come in, I just made lemon bars." They settled in the sunroom overlooking the garden, Scout immediately claiming his favorite spot by the wicker chair. "You look troubled, dear," Eleanor observed, passing Emma a plate. "What's on your mind?" Emma took a deep breath. "Grandma, do you know someone named Gerald Harmon?" The lemon bar in Eleanor's hand stopped halfway to her mouth. After a moment, she set it down untouched. "Where did you hear that name?" Her voice was carefully neutral. "I met him," Emma said. "He was in an accident, and I helped him. He was wearing Mom's ring, Grandma, the one that disappeared when she died." Eleanor's face went pale. "Oh dear, so you do know him?" "Yes," Eleanor said quietly. "I know Gerald. Why did Mom give him her ring?" "He says he gave it to her in 1974, but that's impossible. It's been in our family for generations." Eleanor was silent for a long moment. "Emma, some stories aren't mine to tell, but. She stood and walked to an antique secretary desk in the corner. From a locked drawer, she removed a small wooden box and brought it back to the table. "I should have given you this after your mother passed. I just. I wasn't sure if it was the right time." She opened the box and removed a yellowed envelope. "This might help you understand." Emma took it with trembling hands. Inside was a black and white photograph from the 1970s. It showed her mother young, perhaps 20, standing close to a handsome young man. They were in front of a lake, laughing at the camera. The young man had his arm around Catherine's waist, and though his face was partially turned away, there was something familiar about his profile. "Is that Gerald Harmon?" Eleanor confirmed. "They met at university. Catherine was studying English literature. Gerald was getting his business degree while apprenticing with the local jeweler." Emma stared at the photo. Her mother looked so carefree, so young. "Were they in love?" Eleanor smiled, sadly, desperately. "For almost 2 years. But what about Dad?" "I thought she met him in college." "She met your father later, after Gerald." Emma studied the photo more carefully. There was an easy intimacy between the two that was unmistakable. They looked. Right together. "What happened?" she asked. Eleanor sighed deeply. "Different paths. Gerald was expected to take over his family's jewelry business. Catherine wanted to teach, to make a difference, and. And Emma prompted when her grandmother trailed off. "And Gerald's family didn't approve," Eleanor said carefully. "The Harmons were, well, they had certain expectations about who their son would marry. Catherine came from a modest background. My husband, your grandfather, was a factory worker. We couldn't offer the connections the Harmons wanted for their son." Emma felt a surge of indignation. "They thought she wasn't good enough." "It was a different time," Eleanor said gently, "and the Harmons were very traditional. Eventually, the pressure became too much. They parted ways. But the ring, if it belongs to our family, how did Gerald have it to give to Mom?" Eleanor looked uncomfortable. "That's where things get complicated. The ring. It didn't exactly come from our side of the family." "What do you mean?" "The story Catherine told about her great-grandfather designing it wasn't entirely accurate." Emma felt like the floor was shifting beneath her. "So where did it come from?" Eleanor reached for the photograph, running her finger along the edge. "The ring belonged to Gerald's grandmother, Eliza. She gave it to him when he turned 21, to give to the woman he would marry, and he gave it to Catherine. But they didn't get married," Emma said, confused. "No," Eleanor agreed. But then, the ring had become a symbol of their relationship. When they broke up, Catherine tried to return it. Gerald refused, said it was hers now, that he couldn't imagine anyone else wearing it. Emma sat back, processing this revelation. "So when Mom died, she was returning it to its original owner?" Eleanor nodded. "I suspect so. Your mother never stopped caring for Gerald, even after all those years. She followed his career, kept newspaper clippings about his jewelry designs." She hesitated. "There's something else you should know, Emma. Something about your father." Emma tensed. Her memories of her father were vague, at best a tall figure, who'd left when she was 3 and never returned. Her mother had never spoken ill of him but had been vague about the details of their separation. "What about him?" Eleanor reached across the table and took Emma's hand. When your mother met Richard, your father, she was still heartbroken over Gerald. They married quickly, perhaps too quickly. When she became pregnant with you, they tried to make it work, but he left, Emma finished, because he knew she didn't really love him. It was more complicated than that, Eleanor said gently. But yes, I think he always knew her heart belonged to someone else. The irony is, by then, Gerald had already married Margaret. Emma stared at the photograph, at these two young people whose paths had diverged so dramatically. Did they ever see each other again, Mom and Gerald? Eleanor's expression became guarded. That's something you should ask Gerald. She closed the box carefully. Emma, whatever you learn from the Harmons, remember this. Your mother loved you more than anything in this world. Everything she did with the best intentions. Emma slipped the photograph into her purse, feeling like she was carrying a piece of explosive truth. I'm meeting with Gerald and Catherine tonight. Be gentle with them, Eleanor advised. And with yourself. The past is never as simple as we want it to be. A week passed before Emma saw Gerald again. Catherine had called the morning after their scheduled meeting to say her father had developed complications, nothing serious, but enough that the doctor wanted him back in the hospital for observation. Just a few days, Catherine had assured her, I'll call you when he's home. That call never came, but Emma didn't push. Her conversation with her grandmother had given her a lot to think about, and part of her welcomed the delay. The photo of her mother and Gerald now sat on her nightstand, a window into a past she'd never known existed. When the hospital called to tell her Gerald was asking for her, Emma was surprised. She hadn't left her contact information. He's been quite insistent, the nurse explained. He says it's important. Emma found Gerald sitting in a chair by the window, looking out at the hospital gardens. He seemed frailer than before, but his eyes brightened when she entered. You came, he said, relief evident in his voice. I wasn't sure you would. The nurse said it was important. Emma sat in the chair opposite him. Are you okay? Just a minor setback, nothing dramatic. He waved dismissively. Catherine's been hovering like I'm at death's door. I had to practically order her to go to work today. Emma smiled despite herself. She cares about you. Too much, sometimes. He studied her face. You look like your mother. Same eyes. Emma reached into her bag and pulled out the photograph. I've been doing some research of my own. Gerald's expression softened as he took the photo. Where did you get this? My grandmother. She told me about you and my mother in college. How you gave her the ring that belonged to your grandmother. Gerald traced the outline of Catherine's face in the photo. Eleanor always was straightforward. Did she tell you everything? I think there's more to the story, Emma said carefully. She suggested I ask you directly. Gerald handed the photo back. Smart woman. He took a deep breath. What do you want to know, Emma? After you and my mother broke up, did you ever see each other again? A sad smile crossed his face. Yes, many times over the years. Emma felt her breath catch. What do you mean? Catherine and I reconnected about a year after she married your father. We ran into each other at a faculty event. I was there with a client who was being honored. Gerald's gaze returned to the window. It was like no time had passed. The same connection, the same feeling. Are you saying? Emma couldn't bring herself to finish the question. We didn't plan it, Gerald said quietly. We tried to stay away from each other. We both had made commitments to other people. But sometimes life has other ideas. You had an affair, Emma said flatly. Gerald winced at the word. It wasn't that simple. What Catherine and I had. It wasn't just physical. It was a deep connection that neither of us could fully sever. Emma stood up, suddenly needing space. Did my father know? Is that why he left? No, Gerald said firmly. Richard left before anything happened between Catherine and me again. Their marriage was already falling apart. And what about your wife? Did she know you were seeing my mother behind her back? Gerald's expression grew pained. Margaret knew about Catherine from the beginning. I was honest with her about my past, before we married. And yes, eventually, she figured out that Catherine was still in my life. That must have been devastating for her, Emma said, unable to keep the judgment from her voice. Margaret was an extraordinary woman, Gerald said softly. Much more understanding than I deserved. She and I had a complex arrangement. We loved each other, but in a different way than what Catherine and I shared. Emma shook her head, trying to process this information. How long did it go on? On and off, for many years. We would go months, sometimes years without seeing each other. Then, something would happen, a chance meeting, a life event, and we'd be pulled back together. Gerald's voice grew wistful. The last time was about 5 years ago, after Margaret died. Catherine came to the funeral. Afterward, we talked about maybe finally having our chance, but you didn't, Emma said. No. By then, Catherine was already showing early symptoms of her illness, though neither of us knew it yet. His voice cracked slightly when she was diagnosed. I wanted to be there for her, but she insisted on keeping me at a distance. She said you needed her full attention, that she didn't want to complicate your grief with revelations about the past. Scout, who had been lying quietly at Emma's feet, sensed the tension and stood up, moving to rest his head on Gerald's knee. Almost automatically, Gerald began stroking the dog's head. He likes you, Emma observed. Animals sense things, Gerald said, looking grateful for the momentary change of subject. My Catherine was the same way, as a child always bringing home strays, saying they chose her. At the mention of Catherine, Emma felt a new question form. Catherine was born in 1976, right, after you and my mother broke up. Gerald nodded. Yes, about 2 years after. And my mother and father married in 1977. I was born in 1980. Emma hesitated. During those years when you and my mother were reconnecting, was there ever a time when understanding dawned in Gerald's eyes? You're wondering if I might be your father. The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Gerald shook his head gently. No, Emma. Richard Parker is your biological father. Catherine and I were always careful, and the timing wouldn't align anyway. We weren't in contact during the period when she would have conceived you. Emma felt a complicated mix of relief and, strangely, disappointment. Are you sure? Positive, Gerald said. Catherine would have told me. We had no secrets from each other. He paused. Well, almost none. What do you mean? Gerald sighed deeply. There's something about the ring, about why Catherine had it all those years, that I haven't told you yet. Something I think she wanted you to know, eventually. He looked suddenly exhausted. But not today. I need to rest, and you need time to process what I've already told you. Emma wanted to protest, but Scout winced softly, sensing Gerald's fatigue. All right, she conceded. But I'll be back tomorrow. As she turned to leave, Gerald called after her. Emma, bring that dog of yours again. He's good medicine. Looking back at the elderly man by the window, suddenly appearing small and vulnerable, Emma felt her anger softening into something more complicated. I will, she promised. The next day, Emma received a text from Catherine. Dad's being discharged this afternoon. Still want answers? Come to my house at 7. Emma spent the day distracted, her mind churning with questions. The revelation about her mother and Gerald's long-standing relationship had shaken her. She'd always seen Catherine as straightforward, almost predictable in her steadfast morality. The idea that she'd maintained a decades-long affair seemed wildly out of character. Yet the photo on her nightstand told a different story. The young woman in that image, eyes bright with love, leaning into Gerald's embrace, was a version of her mother Emma had never known. By evening, she'd worked herself into such a state of nervous anticipation that Scout kept whining and nudging her leg, sensing her unease. It's okay, boy, she assured him, grabbing her keys. We're about to get some answers. Catherine's home was a beautifully restored Victorian in an exclusive neighborhood. Emma parked her modest Honda between a BMW and a Lexus, feeling distinctly out of place. Catherine answered the door, wearing slim black pants and a cashmere sweater, looking more relaxed than Emma had seen her previously. Come in, she said, stepping aside. Dad's in the living room. Emma followed her through a foyer decorated with abstract paintings, Catherine's own work. She presumed into a warm, elegant living room. Gerald sat in a leather armchair by a fireplace, a wool blanket across his lap. Despite the mild evening, a chess set was laid out on a table beside him, a game apparently in progress. Emma, he greeted her with a smile. And Scout. Wonderful. Scout immediately went to Gerald, tail wagging, and rested his chin on the man's knee. He remembers you, Emma said, taking a seat on the sofa. Would you like something to drink? Catherine offered. Wine, tea would be nice, thanks. As Catherine disappeared into the kitchen, Emma turned to Gerald. You're looking better. Amazing what familiar surroundings can do, he said. Hospitals drain the life right out of you. An awkward silence fell between them. Emma noticed Gerald was wearing the ring. You said there was more to tell me, she prompted. About the ring. Gerald nodded, absently stroking Scout's head. Yes, but first, I think we should wait for Catherine. This concerns her too. Catherine returned with a tray holding a teapot, cups, and a plate of cookies. As she served the tea, Emma studied her, looking for any resemblance to her mother. There was nothing. Obvious Catherine had her father's blue eyes and fair coloring, while Catherine had been dark-haired with hazel eyes like Emma's own. Once they were all settled, Gerald cleared his throat. Emma, yesterday I told you about the relationship Catherine and I maintained over the years. What I didn't explain was why she kept the ring all that time, only to return it before she died. Catherine shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Dad, are you sure about this? It's time, Katie, Gerald said firmly. Emma deserves to know. He turned back to Emma. When I gave Catherine that ring in 1974, it wasn't just a gift. It was a promise. We were engaged to be married. Engaged, Emma repeated, surprised. Her grandmother hadn't mentioned that detail. Yes, for 3 wonderful months. Then my father found out. Gerald's expression hardened. He made it very clear that if I married Catherine, I would be cut off completely. No inheritance, no position in the family business, nothing. He even threatened to withdraw funding from the small jewelry school where Catherine's father taught part-time. That's horrible, Emma said. It was a different time. Gerald sighed. My family had certain expectations, and Catherine wasn't from the right background. My father was a snub of the highest order. So you broke it off, Emma said, a hint of accusation in her voice. I tried to find another way, Gerald defended. I suggested we elope, start over somewhere new, but Catherine wouldn't hear of it. She refused to be the reason I lost my family and my future. She was always thinking of others, your mother. Catherine set down her teacup with a sharp clink. Tell her the rest, Dad. Gerald gave his daughter a long look, then nodded. When Catherine and I parted ways, she tried to return the ring. I insisted she keep it, told her it would always belong to her, whether we were together or not. What she didn't know was that I had something engraved inside the band. An inscription, Emma asked. Yes, it simply said, forever yours, G.H. small, discreet. I never told her about it. I wanted her to discover it herself someday, to know that no matter what happened, my heart would always be hers. Did she ever find it? Emma asked softly. Not until many years later, Gerald said. After her divorce, when she started wearing the ring on her right hand instead of keeping it in a jewelry box, she called me, in tears. Said she'd been cleaning the ring and noticed the inscription for the first time. That's when their relationship rekindled. Catherine interjected, her tone carefully neutral. Gerald nodded. By then, I was married to Margaret, and Catherine was about 5 years old. Emma glanced at Catherine, trying to gauge her feelings about this revelation. Catherine's expression was composed, but her fingers were tightly laced around her teacup. How did you feel about this? Emma asked her directly. Learning about your father's relationship with my mother. Catherine's lips thinned. I didn't know the full extent of it until I was an adult, but I always sensed there was someone else in my father's life. There were phone calls he would take in private times when he seemed distracted or melancholy for no apparent reason. Catherine, Gerald started, but she held up a hand. It's okay, Dad. It's ancient history now. She turned back to Emma. To answer your question, as a child, I resented the shadow your mother cast over our family. As an adult, I came to understand that love isn't always neat and tidy. My parents had a good marriage in their own way. My mother knew who she was marrying. Margaret knew about the ring, Emma asked. She knew everything, Gerald confirmed. I never lied to her. She accepted that a part of my heart would always belong to Catherine. In return, I gave her everything else I had to give: loyalty, partnership, devotion to our daughter. An unconventional arrangement, Emma observed, but one that worked for us, Gerald said. Until my mother got sick, Catherine added quietly. That's when things changed. Gerald's eyes grew distant. Margaret's illness was sudden pancreatic cancer, diagnosed too late. She was gone within months. Catherine came to the funeral, as a friend. Afterward, we talked about finally being together, openly. After all those years, it seemed like we might get our second chance. But then Mom got sick too, Emma said. Gerald nodded, his eyes filling with tears. Life has a cruel sense of timing. Just as one door opened, another closed. By the time we realized Catherine's symptoms were serious, the cancer was already advanced. And the ring? Emma prompted gently. Why did she give it back to you? Gerald, wiped his eyes with a handkerchief. That's where things get complicated. You see, Catherine had made me a promise. She said when the time was right, she would tell you everything about us, about the ring, about its true history. But then her condition deteriorated so quickly. The night before she died, Emma said, remembering, when you visited her in the hospital while I was asleep. She knew she was running out of time, Gerald said. She gave me the ring and made me promise to find a way to tell you the truth. She said. His voice broke. She said it was time for the ring to come home, and for you to know who you really are. Emma frowned. What do you mean, who I really am? Gerald and Catherine exchanged a look. Emma, Gerald said carefully, there's something about your family, about your mother's family, that you don't know. Something that connects us all in a way you couldn't possibly have imagined. What are you talking about? Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Catherine stood. I'll get it, Dad. She disappeared down a hallway, returning moments later with an ornate wooden box. She placed it on the coffee table between them. The box was exquisite, clearly antique, with mother-of-pearl inlay forming a floral pattern on its lid. Emma recognized the craftsmanship immediately. Her mother had owned a similar trinket box that now sat on Emma's dresser. Open it, Gerald encouraged. With trembling fingers, Emma lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a velvet cushion, was a collection of what appeared to be letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. Beside them lay a small leather journal and several black and white photographs. What is all this? She asked. Catherine's things, Gerald said. She left them with me for safekeeping about a month before she died. She wanted you to have them, but only after you knew the truth about the ring. Emma lifted one of the photographs. It showed a young couple on their wedding day, the woman in a simple white dress, the man in a dark suit, both beaming at the camera. It took her a moment to recognize her grandparents, Eleanor and James Parker, decades younger than she'd ever seen them. Look at the bride's hand, Catherine said softly. Emma peered closer. On Eleanor's finger was a ring, not the rose-engraved one, but a simple gold band. I don't understand, Emma said. What am I supposed to be seeing? Now, look at this one. Gerald handed her another photograph, this one showing an elegant older couple. The woman wore a formal dress and jewels. The man stood stiffly in evening wear. My grandparents, Henry and Eliza Harmon, circa 1925. Emma studied the image, then gasped. On Eliza Harmon's right hand was the rose-engraved ring. This can't be right, Emma said. My great-grandfather designed this ring for his wife. It's been in my family for generations. That's what my mother always told me. What your mother told you was the story she'd been told, Gerald said gently, but it wasn't the complete truth. I don't understand, Emma repeated, feeling increasingly unsettled. Gerald took a deep breath. Emma, have you ever wondered about your mother's maiden name, Parker? What about it? It wasn't always Parker, Gerald said. Your grandfather James was born James Harmon. He was my father's brother. Emma stared at him, uncomprehending. What are you saying? James Harmon, your grandfather, was disowned by his family in 1954, marrying Eleanor, a working-class girl with no social connections. He changed his name to Parker, his mother's maiden. Namond cut all ties with the Harmons. My father never spoke of him. It was as if he never existed. But that would make you and my mother, double quotes. Emma trailed off, trying to process this revelation. First cousins, yes, Gerald confirmed. Though we didn't know it when we met in college. Catherine had no idea of her father's history. James never spoke of his original family or name. Emma felt dizzy. So when you and my mother fell in love, we had no idea we were related, Gerald said. It wasn't until I brought Catherine home and my mother saw her that the truth began to emerge. Catherine looked remarkably like my grandmother, your great-grandmother Eliza. My mother became suspicious and started asking questions. That's when all hell broke loose, Catherine interjected. My grandfather didn't just object to Catherine's social status. He was horrified at the idea of his son marrying his estranged brother's daughter, even unknowingly. But you were cousins, not siblings, Emma said. That's not so uncommon, historically speaking. In my father's mind, it was unacceptable, Gerald said. He threatened to expose the relationship to Catherine's parents if I didn't end it immediately. James, your grandfather, had kept his past hidden for decades. My father knew it would devastate him to have his secret revealed, so you broke up with my mother to protect her family, Emma said slowly. Gerald nodded. Catherine was heartbroken, but she agreed it was for the best. We returned to our separate lives. I gave her the ring, my grandmother's ring, which should have gone to James had he not been disowned, as a way of reconnecting her to the family history she'd never known. But you found your way back to each other, Emma said. Years later, yes. By then, Catherine had learned the truth from her father. James finally told her everything when she was going through her divorce. He thought she deserved to know her full history. Emma's mind was reeling. So the ring really did belong to our family, just not the branch I thought. Exactly, Gerald said. It was commissioned by Henry Harmon for his wife Eliza in 1923. It should have been passed down to their younger son, James, your grandfather. When James was disowned, the ring went to my father instead, who gave it to me. And you gave it to my mother, Emma finished. Yes, and when she returned it to me before she died, she made me promise to tell you the truth, to reconnect you with the family history she'd only discovered later in life. Emma picked up one of the letters from the box, her mother's familiar handwriting visible on the envelope. These are all from my mother. Letters she wrote to me over the years, Gerald confirmed. Times when we were apart, but still connected. And the journal was hers too, started after she learned about her father's true identity. She was processing the revelation that she was actually a Harmon by birth. Which means, Emma looked up, the implication finally dawning on her. You're a Harmon too, Catherine said softly. We're family, Emma. Second cousins, to be precise. Emma turned the journal over in her hands, this tangible piece of her mother's inner thoughts. Why didn't she tell me any of this herself? She was going to, Gerald said. She'd planned to tell you everything after her treatment. She never imagined the cancer would progress so quickly. So instead, she gave you the ring and asked you to tell me. Emma said. Gerald nodded. She wanted you to know where you came from, who you really are. Emma looked down at the box of letters, at the photograph of Eliza Harmon wearing the rose-engraved ring, at Gerald's face, her mother's cousin, her own blood relative. The world she thought she knew had shifted on its axis. I need some time, she said finally. This is a lot. Of course, Gerald said, understanding in his eyes. Take the box, read the letters. It's all yours now. As Emma gathered the box in her arms, Scout pressed against her leg supportively. She glanced at Catherine, seeing her in a new light. Family. After years of being just Emma and her mother, then just Emma alone, suddenly she had family she never knew existed. Thank you, she said quietly, for telling me the truth. Emma spent the next week immersed in her mother's past. Each night, she would curl up with Scout beside her and open another letter, another window into Catherine's secret life. The earliest letters dated from 1975, after their initial breakup, filled with heartbreak and confusion. I don't understand why you've ended things so suddenly, Catherine had written. What changed? What did I do wrong? Later letters, from the early 1980s, after Emma was born, revealed a woman struggling with her choices. I look at my daughter and wonder if I've made a terrible mistake. Richard is a good man, but we both know my heart has always belonged elsewhere. Is it selfish to want more? To want you? The most revealing were those written after Catherine learned the truth about her father's identity. To discover that we're cousins should have been shocking, perhaps even repulsive. Instead, it explains so much: the immediate connection I felt with you, the sense that we somehow belonged together. Does that make me terrible? I don't know anymore. The journal was even more intimate, chronicling Catherine's journey as she processed the revelation about her family history. She'd researched the Harmons extensively, noting connections to her own talents and interests, the artistic sensibility that Dad always said came from his mother. Perhaps it actually traces back to the Harmons and their jewelry legacy. Emma has it too, that eye for beauty, for detail. Harmon blood running through her veins without her knowing it. On Sunday evening, Emma finally reached the last entry, dated just weeks before Catherine's death. The doctors say, my time is short. There's so much I need to tell Emma, about Gerald, about our family, about who she really is. I've asked Gerald to explain everything if I can't. The ring must go back to him. It's time for the circle to close. But Emma should know its history, should understand that she's part of something larger than she realizes. I hope she'll forgive me for keeping this from her. I hope she'll see that in our family, love has always been complicated, but no less real for its complications. Emma closed the journal, tears streaming down her face. Scout winced softly and nudged her hand with his nose. It's okay, boy, she whispered, scratching behind his ears. I'm okay. But was she? The foundation of her identity had been shaken. The straightforward narrative of her family history had been revealed as a carefully constructed fiction. Her mother, her honest, principled mother, had lived a double life for decades, yet as the initial shock faded, Emma found herself not angry but fascinated. The letters revealed a Catherine Parker she'd never known, passionate, conflicted, deeply human. As Catherine had loved fiercely, had struggled with impossible choices, had protected her daughter while grappling with her own complex truth. Monday morning, Emma called in sick to work for the first time in years. Instead of heading to the community center, she drove to her grandmother's cottage, the box of letters beside her on the passenger seat. Eleanor was in the garden, pruning roses. She straightened when she saw Emma approaching, her expression wary. "You know," she said simply. It wasn't a question. "Gerald told me everything," Emma confirmed. "About Grandpa being born a Harmon. About him being disowned and changing his name. About Mom and Gerald being cousins without knowing it." Eleanor removed her gardening gloves slowly. "I wondered when this day would come." "Why didn't you tell me?" Emma asked. No accusation in her tone, just genuine curiosity. "It wasn't my story to tell," Eleanor said, gesturing for Emma to follow her inside. "James, your grandfather made me promise never to speak of it. It was the great shame of his life, being cast out by his family. He never wanted Catherine to know, to feel that rejection." In the kitchen, Eleanor put on a kettle for tea. When Catherine found out Dr. Richard left, and she was struggling as a single mother, it hit her hard. She felt betrayed, lied to, not just about her family history, but about Gerald too, because their relationship had been ended on false pretenses, Emma said. Eleanor nodded. James had no idea about Catherine and Gerald's relationship in college. When Catherine realized that her father's secret had been the wedge that drove them apart, she shook her head. She was furious with James. They didn't speak for months, but they reconciled. Eventually, Catherine came to understand that James had been trying to protect her, in his own misguided way. Eleanor poured the tea. By then, of course, both she and Gerald had married other people, started families, but they found their way back to each other, Emma said. Eleanor's expression was complicated, part disapproval, part understanding. "Yes, I didn't approve, initially. Affairs never end well. But over time, I saw that what they had was different. A connection that defied conventional morality." "Did you know they were still seeing each other all those years?" "I suspected," Eleanor admitted. There were calls she would take in private, weekends when she'd say she was at a teaching conference, but return looking lighter, happier. I never pressed her for details. We all need our secrets, Emma. Emma sipped her tea, thinking about the woman in those letters, so different from the mother she'd known, yet somehow the same in her core values, her capacity for love. "I'm not angry," she said finally. "I thought I would be, but I'm not. I just wish she'd told me herself." She was going to, Eleanor assured her, after her treatment. She never expected the cancer to take her so quickly. They sat in silence, for a moment, the weight of the past settling around them. "There's something else I've been wondering," Emma said eventually. "The ring, if it originally belonged to Eliza Harmon, how did the story about it being designed by my great-grandfather come about?" Eleanor smiled sadly. "That was my contribution, I'm afraid. When Catherine started wearing the ring after her divorce, people naturally asked about it. She couldn't exactly say it came from her cousin who was also her longtime lover. So I suggested a story that it had been in my family, passed down through the generations." Catherine embellished it with details about Albert Parker designing it, making it sound more personal. "A complete fiction," Emma marveled. "Not entirely," Eleanor corrected. "The design really does feature roses because the original Eliza loved them, and it was commissioned specifically for her. We just changed which family it came from." Emma thought about the ring now back on Gerald's finger, where her mother had wanted it to be. "Do you think she made the right choice? Giving it back to him?" Eleanor considered this. "I think Catherine believed the ring had completed its journey. It connected her to Gerald when they couldn't be together openly. It reminded her of her true heritage, and in the end, it brought you to Gerald, connecting the broken branches of your family tree." "I have family I never knew existed," Emma said, still trying to absorb this reality. "Yes," Eleanor agreed. "The question is, what will you do with that knowledge now?" Emma found herself at the hospital again, but not to see Gerald. She'd made an appointment with Dr. Chen, who greeted her with surprise. "Emma, right. Mr. Harmon's rescuer. Yes, Emma confirmed. I hope you don't mind me tracking you down. The receptionist said you had a cancellation this afternoon. Dr. Chen gestured for Emma to sit. What can I help you with? Mr. Harmon was discharged several days ago. Actually, I wanted to ask about my mother, Catherine Parker. She was a patient here 3 years ago. Terminal cancer. Recognition flickered in Dr. Chen's eyes. Parker, yes, I remember her. Ovarian cancer, stage 4 when diagnosed. I wasn't her primary oncologist, but I consulted on her case. I'm trying to piece together something that happened the night before she died, Emma explained. She had a visitor, an older man. A night nurse let him in after hours. Dr. Chen's expression turned cautious. Patient visitation records are confidential. I know, Emma said quickly. I'm not asking you to break any rules. I already know who visited her. I just. I'm trying to understand what happened that night. If she was lucid, capable of making decisions. After a moment's consideration, Dr. Chen pulled the keyboard toward her and typed something into her computer. I can tell you what's in her medical record from that night, which you're entitled to as next of kin. She scanned the screen. The night nurse noted your mother was awake and alert around 2 a.m., in some pain but refusing additional medication because she wanted to remain clear. The nurse checked again at 4 a.m. and found her sleeping peacefully. So she was lucid, Emma said, more to herself than to Dr. Chen, clear enough to know what she was doing. Dr. Chen studied her curiously. May I ask what this is about? My mother gave something valuable to her visitor that night, a family heirloom. I've been wondering if she was herself when she made that decision. According to these notes, she was alert and oriented, Dr. Chen confirmed. The heavy sedation didn't begin until the following morning when her pain became unmanageable. Emma nodded, feeling a weight lift. Her mother's decision to give Gerald the ring hadn't been made in a moment of confusion or drug-induced impairment. It had been deliberate, thought out. Thank you, she said, standing to leave. That helps a lot. Miss Parker, Dr. Chen called as Emma reached the door. I remember your mother, even though our interaction was brief. She spoke about you, how proud she was of you, your resilience. Whatever happened that night, I'm sure she had your best interests at heart. Emma smiled gratefully. I'm beginning to understand that. Outside, Emma checked her phone to find a text from Catherine. Dad asking for you. Says it's important. Can you come by? Within the hour, Emma was back at Catherine's Victorian home. This time, Catherine led her to a sunroom at the back of the house, where Gerald sat examining jewelry pieces laid out on a white cloth. Emma, he greeted her warmly. Thank you for coming. I wanted to show you something. As she approached, Emma saw that the jewelry pieces were all antique necklaces, bracelets, and rings that looked like they belonged in a museum. These were my grandmother Eliza's, Gerald explained. Family pieces I've kept in a safe deposit box for years. The last time I saw your mother, she asked me to share them with you someday, pieces of your heritage she never got to show you herself. Emma carefully picked up a delicate gold locket. These are beautiful. They're your birthright, Gerald said. Harmon family treasures that should have gone to your grandfather James, then to your mother, and now to you. Emma looked up in surprise. You're giving these to me? Gerald nodded. Not all at once, some have been promised to Catherine, of course, but yes, I want you to have several pieces, starting with this. He picked up a bracelet, a slim gold band featuring the same intricate rose design as the ring. This was made as a companion piece to the ring. Eliza wore them as a set. I think Catherine would want you to have it. Emma's throat tightened as Gerald fastened the bracelet around her wrist. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, Gerald assured her. This is simply me honoring Catherine's wishes, connecting you to the family history she discovered too late to fully share with you herself. Catherine, who had been standing quietly in the doorway, stepped forward. Dad had the bracelet refurbished. Specially, we've been planning this since you learned the truth. Emma looked between them. Catherine smiled slightly. Turns out I've been curious about you for years. Mom used to mention Catherine's daughter sometimes. I knew you existed. Knew there was some connection, but not the full story until I was in my 20s. Your mother knew about me? Emma asked, surprised. In her way, Catherine said. She never discussed it directly, but yes, I think she knew a lot about your life through Dad. She wasn't conventional, my mother, but she was compassionate. She understood Dad's situation better than anyone. Gerald looked at his daughter with naked gratitude. Margaret was extraordinary that way. Emma touched the bracelet, feeling its weight. It's history. I've been reading my mother's letters. She mentioned that your mother was an artist. Catherine nodded. A painter, primarily. I have several of her works in my gallery. That's where I get it from, Emma mused. My artistic side. Mom always encouraged it, but neither she nor Grandma Eleanor had the same inclination. The Harmon creative gene, Gerald agreed. Catherine has it too, obviously. A silence fell, not uncomfortable but full of unspoken possibilities. I've been thinking, Emma said finally, about what all this means. Finding out about this whole other branch of my family, and, Catherine prompted. And I'd like to know more, Emma said simply. About the Harmons. About my grandfather's life before he became James Parker. About this shared history I never knew I had. Gerald's face lit up. I'd be honored to tell you everything I know. James was my hero when I was a boy 6 years older, and endlessly fascinating to a little brother. I have photos, stories. I'd like that, Emma said. She turned to Catherine. And I'd like to see your mother's paintings sometime, if that's okay. Catherine seemed surprised by the request, but nodded. Of course. The gallery is featuring several of her works in next month's exhibition. You should come. I will, Emma promised. She looked down at the bracelet again, at the roses that matched the ones on the ring Gerald still wore. My mother wanted me to know where I came from, who I really am. I think I'm ready to find out. Your mother would be proud, Gerald said, softly. She always said you had her curiosity, her determination to understand the world, and her capacity for forgiveness, Catherine added unexpectedly. She forgave my grandfather for keeping the family history from her. She forgave Dad for breaking her heart all those years ago. Catherine understood that love and anger can exist simultaneously, Gerald said. That forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but choosing to move forward anyway. Emma thought about the complicated woman revealed in those letters, so different from the straightforward mother she thought she'd known, yet somehow more real, more human in her complexity. I have one more question, she said. The accident to your car crash. It happened on my regular dog walking route. But you don't live anywhere near there. Why were you in that neighborhood that morning? Gerald and Catherine exchanged a look. I was coming to see you, actually, Gerald admitted. I've been driving by your apartment building for years. Catherine gave me the address long ago, asked me to keep an eye on you from a distance after she was gone. That morning, I'd finally worked up the courage to approach you directly. Then, the rain started. I took the corner too fast. He shrugged. Fate intervened. You've been watching over me. Emma wasn't sure whether to feel touched or disturbed. Not in a creepy way, Gerald clarified quickly. Just making sure you were okay. Catherine worried about you being alone. I promised her I'd look out for you, Catherine added. We both did, we just weren't sure how to approach you without revealing everything all at once. Emma thought about the generous donations to the community center, the high-quality art supplies that had appeared regularly over the past 3 years, the donations to the center that was you looking out for me. Catherine nodded. It seemed like the least I could do. For Catherine's daughter. For family. Family. The words settled around Emma like a warm blanket. For 3 years, she'd believed herself alone in the world except for her aging grandmother. Now, in the most unexpected way, she'd discovered connections she never knew existed. Well, she said, a small smile forming, I guess it took a car accident to bring us together properly. Some things are just meant to be, Gerald said, twisting the rose-engraved ring on his finger, even if they take the most circuitous route to get there. Summer turned to fall, and Emma found herself spending more time with the Harmons. Sunday dinners at Catherine's became a tradition, with Gerald telling stories of the family history, while Scout lounged contentedly at his feet. Emma learned about Eliza Harmon's passion for gardening, the inspiration for the rose motif on the ring, and Henry Harmon's journey from apprentice to master jeweler. She heard tales of her grandfather James as a rebellious young man, always challenging the family's rigid expectations. He was the artistic one, Gerald recalled one evening, always sketching, creating. Father wanted him to focus on the business side of jewelry, but James was interested in the craft itself. Like mother, like daughter, Catherine observed, nodding toward Emma's sketchbook. Emma had taken to bringing her drawings to these gatherings, finding inspiration in the antique jewelry pieces Gerald would occasionally bring from his collection. Did my grandfather ever design jewelry? Emma asked. Absolutely, Gerald confirmed. Before he left the family, he created several remarkable pieces. I believe your grandmother Eleanor still has one, a pendant he made for her during their courtship. Emma made a mental note to ask Eleanor about it. Her grandmother had become more forthcoming about the past since Emma's discovery, seeming relieved to finally share these long-held secrets. After dinner, as Catherine cleared the dishes, Gerald motioned Emma to follow him into the study. He closed the door behind them and retrieved a leather portfolio from his desk. "There's something else I wanted to show you," he said, his tone more serious than usual. "Something I found among Catherine's things after she returned the ring." He opened the portfolio to reveal legal documents, Catherine's will. Emma realized as she scanned the first page. "I don't understand," she said. "I already settled Mom's estate. The house, her savings, it all went to me. This is an amendment she made about 2 months before she died," Gerald explained. "She never filed it officially. I think she ran out of time, but her intentions are clear." Emma read through the document, her confusion growing. "She named you as a beneficiary, not of her financial assets," Gerald clarified. "Just of certain personal items, specifically her jewelry collection." "The family pieces," Emma said, understanding dawning. "The ones she told me would be mine someday." Gerald nodded. "She knew I would recognize their significance, ensure they were properly preserved until you were ready to know the truth." "But she already gave you the ring," Emma pointed out. "Why include it in her will too?" "The ring was a personal gift from Catherine to me," Gerald said. "This amendment was her legal attempt to acknowledge my right to the other Harmon pieces. She possessed a few brooches, some earrings that had belonged to Eliza." "Why are you showing me this now?" Emma asked. Gerald hesitated. "Because I want to make things right, legally as well as morally. I've had my lawyer draw up paperwork transferring ownership of those pieces back to you. Catherine wanted me to safeguard them, temporarily, not keep them permanently." Emma was touched by his integrity. "You don't have to do that. If Mom wanted you to have them, she wanted them to stay in the family," Gerald interrupted gently. "And now that you know you're a Harmon, they should be yours." Before Emma could respond, the study door opened and Catherine entered, carrying a tray with coffee. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, noting the document spread across the desk. "Dad, are you sure about this?" "It's the right thing to do," Gerald said firmly. Catherine set down the tray and turned to Emma. "My father has been obsessing over this for weeks. He's convinced your mother meant for you to have everything Harmon-related, including the ring," Gerald added quietly. Emma looked at him in surprise. "The ring? But that was yours originally. Mom specifically returned it to you because she thought it was where it belonged at that moment," Gerald said. "But long term, I believe she would have wanted it to pass to you eventually." Catherine made a small noise of disagreement. "Dad, we've talked about this. The ring has been your connection to Catherine all these years. You don't need to give it up." Emma studied Gerald's face, noting the conflict in his eyes. "Is that what this is about? You're planning to give me the ring?" "Not immediately," Gerald clarified. "But in my will, yes, I've designated it to pass to you rather than to Catherine. And I've told him that's unnecessary." Catherine interjected. "The ring should stay with him as long as he lives, then come to me as his daughter." Emma felt caught in an uncomfortable position between father and daughter. "I don't want to cause any conflict." "You're not," Gerald assured her. "Catherine and I simply have different perspectives on what Catherine would have wanted, because I knew her too," Catherine said, a hint of emotion in her voice. "She wouldn't have wanted to create division in the family. She fought so hard to reconnect." Emma looked between them, suddenly understanding the deeper currents. This wasn't just about a piece of jewelry. It was about competing claims to Catherine's memory, her legacy. "I think," Emma said carefully, "that my mother would have wanted the ring to unite us, not divide us." "Exactly," Catherine said. "But more than that," Emma continued. "I think she would have wanted us to decide together, as a family, what happens to these heirlooms. Not through legal documents or wills, but through conversation, understanding." Gerald considered this, then slowly nodded. "You sound just like Haraway's, finding the wise middle path. So what do you suggest?" Catherine asked, her tone softening. Emma thought for a moment. "Let's take our time. There's no rush to decide the ultimate fate of the ring or any of these pieces. For now, I'm just grateful to be learning about this part of my heritage, to be connecting with both of you." Gerald smiled, visibly relieved. "A sensible approach. And in the meantime," Emma added, I'd like to see the other Harmon pieces, the ones my mother had. Not to take them, just to know what exists, to understand their history. We can arrange that, Gerald agreed. Perhaps next Sunday. As Emma drove home that evening, the weight of the day's revelations settled around her. She'd gone from believing herself alone in the world to navigating the complex dynamics of newfound family. It was overwhelming, but also strangely comforting. Scout dozed in the passenger seat beside her, exhausted from the attention he'd received at Catherine's. He'd become an unexpected bridge between Emma and the Harmons. Gerald adored him, and even Catherine had warmed to his gentle presence. At a red light, Emma glanced at the rose bracelet on her wrist, thinking about its twin, the ring that had started this journey. How strange that a simple band of gold could contain so much history, so many intertwined lives. The light turned green, and Emma drove on, toward her apartment, but also toward a future suddenly rich with connections she'd never imagined possible. October brought cooler weather and a steady rhythm to Emma's expanded life. Work at the community center remained fulfilling. Her friendship with Michael stayed strong despite his initial suspicions about Gerald, and her Sundays with the Harmons became the highlight of her week. Even Scout seemed to thrive with the new arrangements, growing especially attached to Gerald, who always had a special treat and endless patience for the golden retriever. He knows a kindred spirit when he meets one, Emma joked one Sunday as Scout rested his head on Gerald's knee during dinner. Dogs have excellent judgment, Gerald replied, slipping Scout another morsel under the table when he thought Catherine wasn't looking. I saw that, Dad, Catherine said with mock severity. You're spoiling him, prerogative of the elderly. Gerald winked at Emma. These moments of easy familiarity still surprised Emma how quickly they'd fallen into the rhythms of family. Despite the unusual circumstances that had brought them together, after dinner, as they settled in the living room with coffee, Catherine brought up a subject that had been hovering at the edges of their conversations for weeks. The gallery opening is next Friday, she said. Mom's retrospective. I was hoping you'd both come. Wouldn't miss it, Gerald assured her. I'll be there, Emma added. I've been looking forward to seeing your mother's work. Catherine seemed pleased but nervous. It's the first comprehensive showing of her paintings since she died. I've spent months tracking down pieces from private collections. It's going to be wonderful, Gerald said confidently. Margaret would be proud. I hope so, Catherine said. I've sent invitations to everyone who was important to her. She hesitated, including your grandmother, Emma. I wasn't sure if that was appropriate, but ... That was thoughtful, Emma assured her. I'm sure Grandma Eleanor will appreciate it. She's been asking about you both. Gerald raised his eyebrows. Has she? Emma nodded. She said she'd like to see you again. It's been, 40 years? Since James's funeral in '84, Gerald confirmed. I attended, though I stayed at the back. Eleanor saw me but we didn't speak. There was ... too much history. Maybe it's time to change that, Emma suggested. The following Friday, Emma arrived at Harmon Gallery 15 minutes before the official opening. The space was elegant, high ceilings, polished wood floors, and perfect lighting highlighting the artwork. Catherine greeted her with an uncharacteristic hug. You came early, good. I wanted you to see everything before the crowds arrived. She led Emma through the gallery, where dozens of paintings were displayed chronologically, showing Margaret Harmon's artistic evolution over 4 decades. Mom started painting seriously in her 20s, Catherine explained, stopping before an early work of vibrant landscape with bold colors and confident brushstrokes. She was largely self-taught, but her natural talent was evident from the beginning. As they moved through the exhibition, Emma was struck by the emotional depth in Margaret's work: joy, melancholy, serenity, and occasionally, a powerful sense of longing. These are extraordinary, she said honestly. I had no idea. Few people did, Catherine said. Mom was private about her art. She painted for herself, not for recognition. She paused before a particularly striking canvas, a woman seated at a window, her face in profile, looking out at a garden blooming with roses. This is one of her last works, completed just months before her diagnosis. Emma studied the painting, noting the exquisite detail in the roses, the peaceful yet somehow wistful expression on the woman's face. It's beautiful. Look closer, Catherine said softly. Emma leaned in, noticing a small detail she'd missed. The woman's right hand was a ring with a rose design unmistakably similar to the one Gerald wore. Is that Mom's interpretation of the Harmon ring? Catherine confirmed. She knew its significance to Dad, To your mother. This painting was her way of acknowledging that complicated history. Emma was speechless, moved by this visual evidence of Margaret's understanding and acceptance. She knew everything, Catherine continued, about Catherine, about their relationship. She wasn't bitter or jealous. She simply recognized that Dad's heart had room to love them both, differently but genuinely. Before Emma could respond, the gallery door opened and Gerald entered, escorting Eleanor Parker. Emma's grandmother looked elegant in a simple navy dress, her silver hair arranged in its usual neat bun. "Look who I found outside," Gerald called, his voice warm with pleasure. Eleanor spotted Emma and smiled, then turned to Catherine with slight hesitation. "Thank you for the invitation. Your gallery is lovely. I'm so glad you could come," Catherine said, extending her hand. "It means a lot to have you here." As the two women began a tentative conversation, Gerald moved to Emma's side. "This feels significant," he murmured. "Eleanor and Catherine, meeting properly after all these years. A full circle moment," Emma agreed. She nodded toward the painting of the woman with the rose ring. "Catherine was just showing me this. Did you know Margaret painted the ring?" Gerald's eyes softened as he gazed at the canvas. "Yes, she painted it several times over the years, always in different contexts. It was her way of processing, I think, of integrating Catherine's presence in our lives into something meaningful rather than threatening." "She sounds remarkable," Emma said. "She was," Gerald agreed, "different from Catherine in many ways, but equally extraordinary in her capacity for understanding, for compassion." As they spoke, the gallery began filling with guests. Catherine moved into host mode, greeting patrons and collectors, while Eleanor found a comfortable seat near a grouping of early landscapes. Emma circulated through the growing crowd, occasionally catching Gerald's eye across the room, sharing silent moments of connection as they both observed Eleanor and Catherine gradually warming to each other through shared appreciation of Margaret's art. Near the end of the evening, as the crowd thinned, Emma found herself standing alone before the painting with the rose ring. She felt rather than saw Gerald approach, his presence familiar now after months of Sunday dinners and shared stories. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "About interconnected lives," Emma said. "My mother, you, Margaret Toll, linked by this ring, by choices made decades ago, by loves both fulfilled and denied." Gerald nodded thoughtfully. "And now you're part of that chain." "It's strange," Emma admitted. "I always thought I knew exactly who I was, where I came from. Now I realize I was only seeing part of the picture." "Does that trouble you?" Gerald asked gently. Emma considered the question. "No," she said finally. "It's like discovering new rooms in a house I thought I knew completely. Surprising, but ultimately enriching." Gerald smiled, clearly pleased by her response. Catherine would have loved that metaphor. They stood in companionable silence, studying the painting, the serene woman, the meaningful ring, the roses in full bloom outside the window. "I think," Gerald said eventually, "that Margaret was trying to say something important with this painting, about how love doesn't diminish when it's shared, it simply finds new expressions, new patterns, like the roses on the ring," Emma suggested, "each one distinct but part of the same design." Gerald looked at her with a mixture of surprise and recognition. "Exactly like that. You truly are Catherine's daughter. You have her insight, her way with words." As the gallery lights dimmed, signaling closing time, Emma watched Catherine help Eleanor to her feet. The two women engaged in animated conversation. "And look at that," Gerald said, following her gaze. "New connections forming, old wounds healing. Family," Emma said simply, the words still fresh and wondrous on her tongue. "Family," Gerald agreed, his hand finding hers briefly, a gentle squeeze, conveying everything words could not. As winter approached, Gerald's health began to decline. Nothing dramatic, just the gradual slowing that came with age, exacerbated by the lingering effects of his accident. Emma noticed his shorter breath during their walks, the way he needed to rest more frequently during their Sunday gatherings. Catherine noticed too. Emma often caught her watching her father with worried eyes, though she tried to hide her concern behind her usual composed facade. "Has he seen his doctor recently?" Emma asked Catherine one Sunday as they washed dishes together while Gerald napped in the living room. Catherine nodded, hands deep in soapy water. "Last week. Nothing specific, just the general wear and tear of being 70. She lowered her voice. "But he's been having these spells of melancholy. The doctor thinks it might be mild depression. not uncommon after physical trauma. Is there anything I can do? Emma asked. Catherine passed her a plate to dry. You're already doing it. These Sundays. They've become the highlight of his week. Having you in our lives, it's like having a piece of Catherine back. Emma felt a warm glow at Catherine's words. Over the past months, her initial wariness had transformed into genuine affection for this woman who could have resented her but had instead welcomed her into the family. I've been thinking, Emma said, carefully folding the dish towel. With the holidays coming up, maybe we could do something special. Combine our traditions. Catherine looked surprised but pleased. What did you have in mind? Christmas at your place, perhaps. I could bring Grandma Eleanor. We could cook together, exchange gifts. A proper family Christmas, Catherine mused. Dad would love that. The idea grew over the following weeks. Eleanor was hesitant at first. Are you sure it won't be awkward, dear? But eventually agreed, especially after Catherine visited her cottage to personally extend the invitation. Gerald, when told of the plan, was visibly moved. All of us together, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Catherine would have loved that. As Christmas approached, Emma found herself thinking more and more about the ring. It had become a familiar sight on Gerald's hand, no longer a shock but a comforting reminder of the connection between their families. Still, questions lingered about its ultimate fate. One evening in mid-December, Emma received an unexpected call from Catherine. Dad wants to see you, she said without preamble. Just you, not a regular Sunday gathering. Can you come over? Is everything okay? Emma asked, instantly concerned. Yes, he's fine. He just has something he wants to discuss with you privately. Emma arrived at Catherine's Victorian an hour later to find Gerald alone in the study, various jewelry pieces laid out before him on a velvet cloth. Thank you for coming, he said, motioning her to sit beside him. I've been thinking about our family heirlooms, about what should happen to them. Emma noted that the rose ring was among the items on display. Is this about what we discussed before? The inheritance question. Gerald nodded. I've made some decisions, with Catherine's blessing. He indicated the collection before them. These pieces represent generations of Harmon history, our shared history. I've documented each one, its origins and significance. He handed Emma a leather-bound book. Inside, in Gerald's elegant handwriting, was a catalogue of the jewelry, complete with photographs and detailed descriptions. This is incredible, Emma said, turning the pages carefully. I want you to have this record, regardless of which pieces eventually come to you, Gerald explained, to understand the legacy you're part of. He picked up a pair of sapphire earrings. These were my mother's, your great-aunt's technically. They'll go to Catherine next. He selected a pearl brooch. This belonged to Elisa. Catherine has always admired it, so it will be hers as well. One by one, Gerald sorted the pieces, explaining his reasoning for each decision. Some would go to Catherine, others to Emma, a few to more distant relatives. Emma noticed that he deliberately avoided touching the rose ring. Finally, when every other piece had been discussed, Gerald sat back with a sigh. And then there's this. He gestured to the ring without picking it up. The piece that brought us together. Emma waited, sensing his internal struggle. I've thought about this endlessly, Gerald admitted. What Catherine would want, what's fair to everyone involved. The ring has such significance for all of us, for different reasons. Whatever you decide, Emma assured him, I'll understand. Gerald smiled gratefully. That's very like your mother, always putting others at ease. He took a deep breath. I've decided that the ring should remain with me until I'm gone. After that, he hesitated, then continued, after that, I want it to be buried with me. Of all the possibilities Emma had considered, this wasn't one of them. Buried. It's symbolic, I know, Gerald acknowledged. But the ring has completed its journey, I think. It brought Catherine and me together, twice. It connected you to your Harmon heritage. It served its purpose in this world. Emma considered this unexpected solution, and Catherine agrees. It was her suggestion, actually, Gerald admitted. She said the ring has caused enough complications across generations that perhaps it should rest with me, the last person to receive it directly from Catherine's hands. There was a profound logic to the idea, clean ending to a complex story. Still, Emma felt a twinge of, not disappointment exactly, but a sense of something unresolved. You disagree? Gerald asked, noting her expression. No, Emma said slowly, it's just. The ring has been a connection, a bridge between our families. Burying it feels like closing a door that's only recently been opened. Gerald studied her face. An interesting perspective. What would you suggest instead? Emma hadn't expected the question. She thought for a moment, then said, what if, instead of being buried, the ring was placed somewhere significant, somewhere we could all visit, remember, like where? I'm not sure, Emma admitted. Maybe, my mother's grave, or a special place that was meaningful to both of you. Gerald's eyes lit with sudden inspiration. Or transformed into something new, he said. Something that honors its history while creating a new legacy. What do you mean? The ring could be melted down and recast, Gerald explained, enthusiasm growing in his voice, using the same gold, the same rose motif, but creating two new pieces matching pendants. Perhaps, one for you, one for Catherine. Emma felt her heart lift at the idea. Continuing the connection while acknowledging that we're starting a new chapter. Exactly, Gerald said. What do you think? I think it's perfect, Emma said honestly. It honors the past without being bound by it. Gerald picked up the ring, turning it to catch the light. I'll speak to Catherine about it. If she agrees, I know a master jeweler who could do the work, a former apprentice of mine who understands the significance. And if she doesn't agree, Emma asked, then we'll find another solution. Gerald said simply, together, as a family. Family. The word still carried a special resonance for Emma. Months after discovering her connection to the Harmons. As she drove home that evening, Emma called her grandmother to confirm Christmas arrangements. Eleanor sounded excited about the upcoming gathering. I'm making my special cranberry sauce, dear. Catherine specifically requested it. The ease with which their separate lives were intertwining still amazed Emma. In less than a year, she'd gone from believing herself nearly alone in the world to being surrounded by family complicated, imperfect, but undeniably hers. At a stoplight, Emma glanced at the rose bracelet on her wrist. Thinking about Gerald's proposal for the ring's future, there was something profoundly right about the idea of transformation rather than ending, of creating something new from the old. Just as she and Catherine were creating a new kind of family from the tangled roots of their shared past. The light turned green, and Emma drove on, toward home but also toward a future suddenly rich with possibilities. She'd never imagined on that rainy morning when she'd pulled an elderly stranger from a crashed car and discovered her mother's ring on his finger. Christmas Eve arrived with a light dusting of snow, giving Catherine's Victorian home a picture-perfect holiday appearance. Emma and Eleanor arrived early, arms laden with gifts and food contributions. Scout trotting happily ahead with a festive bandana around his neck. Merry Christmas. Catherine greeted them at the door, looking more relaxed than Emma had ever seen her in a soft cashmere sweater instead of her usual tailored attire. Come in, it's freezing out there. The house was transformed. A tall Fraser fir dominated the living room, adorned with what Emma recognized as antique ornaments, likely Harmon family heirlooms. Garlands draped the staircase, and holiday music played softly in the background. Gerald emerged from the kitchen wearing an apron. The turkey is behaving itself, he announced, then beamed at the sight of Emma and Eleanor. The family has arrived. The easy way he included Eleanor in family wasn't lost on Emma. Her grandmother seemed to notice too, her eyes brightening as Gerald took her coat. I brought my cranberry sauce, Eleanor said, offering a crystal dish, and Emma insisted on making Catherine's chocolate pie. Dad will be thrilled, Catherine said. He's been talking about Catherine's pie for weeks. The afternoon unfolded with a warmth that surpassed Emma's expectations. Eleanor and Gerald fell into reminiscing about the past, but without the weight of secrets that had previously shadowed their shared history. James would be so pleased to see this, Eleanor commented, as they all worked together in the kitchen, his brother and his granddaughter, finally knowing each other. He was always the peacemaker, Gerald agreed. Even as children, Catherine, arranging vegetables on a platter, asked, what was he like? My Uncle James. Dad rarely spoke of him when I was growing up. Eleanor's face softened with memory. Gentle, creative, stubborn when it mattered. She glanced at Gerald. Much like someone else I know. Gerald chuckled. The stubborn part, certainly. As Catherine and Eleanor continued comparing notes about the Parker Harmon men, Emma slipped out to the sunroom where Scout had settled for a nap. Through the window, she could see the garden, dormant now under its blanket of snow but promising renewal in spring. Gerald joined her a few minutes later, escaping the kitchen chaos. Just taking a moment, Emma said. It's all so overwhelming, Gerald suggested. In the best possible way, Emma clarified. A few months ago, I thought I was alone, except for Grandma. Now look at USA, proper family Christmas. Gerald's eyes crinkled with pleasure. Catherine would have loved this. She would, Emma agreed. Though I keep thinking how strange it is that she never got to see it, this reconciliation she wanted so much. Perhaps she orchestrated it from beyond, Gerald said lightly. The ring finding its way back to you, through my accident, it's almost too perfect to be coincidence. Emma smiled at the thought. Mom always did like to manage things. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the snow begin to fall again outside. I spoke to Catherine about the ring, Gerald said eventually, about transforming it rather than burying it. And, Emma prompted when he paused, she loves the idea. We've already spoken to Anton, my former apprentice. He'll begin the work after the holidays. Relief and happiness washed through Emma. I'm glad it feels right. There's something else, Gerald added. Something Catherine and I have been discussing. He hesitated. The gallery is doing well, but Catherine has always wanted to expand into custom jewelry, combining her artistic eye with the Harmon tradition. That sounds perfect for her, Emma said. The thing is, Gerald continued, she needs someone with a fresh perspective, someone who understands both art and community outreach. He looked at Emma meaningfully. Someone like you. Emma blinked in surprise. Are you offering me a job? A partnership, actually, Gerald corrected. Your programs at the community center have always impressed Catherine. She thinks we both think that your approach to making art accessible could translate well to a new venture, teaching jewelry design to underprivileged youth, perhaps creating a scholarship program, a Harmon tradition reimagined for a new generation. Emma mused, the possibilities unfurling in her mind. Exactly. The business side would still be Catherine's domain, but the outreach, the education component, that could be yours. The offer was unexpected but strangely appealing. Emma had always loved her work at the community center, but lately she'd been feeling the pull toward something that more directly connected to her newly discovered heritage. I'd need to think about it, she said. It would be a big change. Of course, Gerald agreed. No rush, it's just something to consider for the future. Before Emma could respond, Catherine called from the dining room. Dinner's ready. You too. The meal that followed was everything Emma had hoped for: delicious food, flowing conversation, and most importantly, a sense of belonging that wrapped around the table like the garlands on the staircase. Eleanor shared stories of Catherine. As a child, Gerald contributed tales of the jewelry business. Catherine described her plans for the gallery's spring exhibition as they finished the chocolate pie, exactly like Catherine's. Gerald declared with satisfaction. Ma found herself studying the faces around the table, memorizing the moment. A toast, Gerald proposed, raising his glass. To family lost, found, and created. To family, they echoed, glasses clinking in the warm light. Later, as they exchanged gifts by the fire, Emma was struck by the thoughtfulness of Catherine's present to her a leather-bound sketchbook embossed with both the Parker and Harmon names. For your new designs, Catherine explained. If you decide to join us, you told her about the offer. Emma asked Gerald. It was her idea, he replied. Emma looked at Catherine with new understanding. You want me involved in the family business? I think we'd make a good team, Catherine said simply. Different strengths, shared vision. As the evening wound down and Eleanor dozed by the fire, Scout curled at her feet, Emma found herself standing with Catherine and Gerald by the Christmas tree, admiring an antique star at its top. That star has crowned every Harmon Christmas tree since 1920, Gerald told her. Another tradition that continues. Emma thought about traditions, those she'd inherited from her mother, those she was discovering through the Harmons, and those yet to be created. Whatever you decide about the business, Catherine said, seeming to read her thoughts, you're part of this family now. That doesn't change. I know, Emma said, and realized she truly did. Whatever path she chose, these connections, complicated, precious, would remain. 6 months later, on a warm June afternoon, Emma stood before a group of teenagers in the newly renovated studio space behind Harmon Gallery. Sunlight streamed through skylights, illuminating workbenches equipped with jewelry-making tools. Today we're focusing on design principles, Emma explained, gesturing to the mood boards pinned around the room. Before we touch any metal, we need a clear vision of what we want to create. The Teens 15 participants in the inaugural Harmon Parker Youth Design Program listened attentively. They came from various backgrounds, all with artistic talent, but limited opportunities. Identified through Emma's connections at the community center. Remember, Emma continued, jewelry isn't just decorative. It tells stories, preserves memories, connects generations. She touched the rose pendant at her throat, one half of the transformed ring, its twin worn by Catherine. Each piece you create has the potential to become someone's treasured heirloom. As the students began sketching their initial designs, Emma circulated among them, offering guidance and encouragement. At the back of the room, she noticed Gerald watching from the doorway, leaning on his cane but standing straighter than he had in months. "How's it going, Professor Parker?" he asked when she approached. Emma smiled at the nickname he'd given her when she accepted the position as education director for the newly established Harmon Parker Foundation. "They're talented, eager, a bit intimidated by the facilities, but they'll settle in, just like you did." Gerald observed. It was true. The transition from the community center to the foundation had been challenging at first, learning the jewelry business, establishing the scholarship program, navigating her new professional relationship with Catherine. But over the past months, Emma had found her footing, bringing her experience with at-risk youth to the Harmon legacy of craftsmanship and artistry. "Anton is coming tomorrow to demonstrate metalworking techniques," Emma told Gerald. "He's been incredibly supportive of the program. He understands its importance," Gerald said. "Creating opportunities for young artists was always part of the Harmon tradition, before my father's time at least. A tradition worth reviving." Emma agreed. As Gerald returned to the main gallery, where Catherine was preparing for an evening exhibition, Emma rejoined her students. One girl was struggling with her design, erasing and redrawing repeatedly. "What's the challenge, Zoe?" Emma asked, pulling up a stool beside her. "I can't get the flowers right," Zoe said, frustration evident in her voice. "They look stiff, not flowing like the ones on your pendant." Emma touched her rose pendant reflexively. "These roses took generations to perfect. My great-great-grandfather designed the original pattern, and it's been refined over decades." "Really?" Zoe looked impressed. "That's the kind of designer I want to be, someone whose work lasts that long." "It could happen," Emma said. "But first, let's work on those flowers. Try thinking about them as movement, rather than objects. See how each petal leads to the next." By the end of the session, Zoe had produced a design that, while different from the Harmon roses, had its own flowing elegance. "This is beautiful," Emma told her sincerely. "Truly original." "Thanks to your help," Zoe said, carefully placing her sketch in her portfolio. As the students departed, Emma began tidying the studio, a sense of satisfaction warming her. This was exactly what she'd hoped for when she accepted Gerald and Catherine's proposal, the chance to blend her passion for mentoring with her newfound connection to the Harmon artistic legacy. Catherine appeared in the doorway, elegant in a black dress for the evening's gallery event. "Successful first day." "Very," Emma confirmed. "Your investment in this program is going to pay off in ways you can't imagine." "Our investment," Catherine corrected. "This is as much your vision as mine." She helped Emma straighten the workbenches. "Dad's in particularly good spirits today. Says watching you teach reminded him of his early days apprenticing at the jewelry school." "He's looking better," Emma observed. "More energy." "The new medication is helping," Catherine said. "And honestly, I think this," she gestured around the studio, "gives him a sense of purpose. Seeing the Harmon legacy continue, not just through the business but through education, through you." Emma understood. In the months since Christmas, Gerald had experienced several health setbacks, each recovery a little slower than the last. But his enthusiasm for the foundation never wavered, and he took particular joy in Emma's role within it. "Eleanor's coming to the exhibition tonight?" Catherine asked, changing the subject. "Wouldn't miss it," Emma confirmed. "She's bringing her friend Judith from the book club." Catherine smiled. "Dad will be pleased. He enjoys their debates about literature." It still amazed Emma how comfortably Eleanor had integrated into their expanded family circle, her initial hesitation giving way to genuine affection for both Catherine and Gerald. She'd even begun volunteering at the gallery once a week, her knowledge of art history proving unexpectedly valuable. Later that evening, as the gallery filled with patrons admiring the exhibition of emerging artists, Emma found herself standing between her grandmother and Gerald, all three watching Catherine expertly navigate the crowd. "She's good at this," Eleanor commented. Reminds me of James at faculty events. Always knew exactly what to say to put people at ease. High praise indeed, Gerald said, clearly pleased by the comparison. Emma observed the easy interaction between her grandmother and Gerald, marveling at how time and forgiveness had transformed decades of estrangement into a comfortable friendship. Ms. Parker, a hesitant voice interrupted her thoughts. Emma turned to find Zoe, looking somewhat out of place in the sophisticated gallery setting. Zoe, I'm so glad you came. Emma greeted her warmly. Let me introduce you to my grandmother, Eleanor Parker, and Gerald Harmon, our foundation's namesake. As Zoe shyly shook hands with both elders, Emma felt the surge of pride not just in her students' courage in attending such an intimidating event, but in the continuity represented by this moment. Eleanor and Gerald, the past, Emma herself, the present, and Zoe, perhaps, the future. Zoe created a beautiful floral design today, Emma told them. A completely original approach to the nature motifs we discussed. I'd love to see it sometime, Gerald said kindly. Actually, Zoe reached into her bag and carefully extracted her portfolio. I brought it, if you wouldn't mind looking. As Gerald examined Zoe's sketch with genuine interest, offering thoughtful feedback that made the girl's eyes light up, Emma caught Catherine's gaze across the room. Catherine raised her glass slightly in acknowledgement, a small smile playing at her lips. In that moment, Emma felt the separate threads of her life, past and present, Parker and Harmon, personal and professional, weaving together into something stronger and more beautiful than she could have imagined a year ago. The rose pendant at her throat seemed to warm against her skin, a tangible reminder of the journey that had brought her here, a journey that began with a car crash, a stolen ring, and the courage to pursue an uncomfortable truth. 1 year to the day after the accident, Emma walked Scout along the same route where she'd found Gerald's crashed car. The path held different associations now, not just the shock of that rainy morning discovery, but the extraordinary journey that had followed. Scout trotted ahead, occasionally glancing back as if to ensure she was still following. At 7 years old, he remained energetic, but had developed a watchful protectiveness, especially around Gerald, whose health continued to fluctuate. Emma paused at the spot where the accident had occurred. The road had been repaired, all traces of the crash long erased, but Emma could still picture the scene vividly, the smoking wreckage, the unconscious elderly man, the moment she'd spotted her mother's ring on his finger. Everything changed here, Scout, she murmured. The retriever cocked his head, his brown eyes attentive. Our whole life changed because of one morning walk. Her phone chimed with a text from Catherine. Where are you? Dad's asking. Emma smiled and typed back, at the crash site. Feeling sentimental. Be there soon. They were gathering at Catherine's for Sunday dinner, as had become their tradition. Gerald had been insistent about marking the anniversary of the accident, calling it the most fortunate car crash in history. As Emma and Scout continued their walk, she reflected on the year's transformations. The Harmon Parker Foundation had flourished, with 3 successful youth programs completed and a waiting list for the fall session. Catherine had expanded the gallery to include a permanent jewelry exhibition featuring both historical Harmon pieces and contemporary works by program graduates. Emma's own role had evolved to include designing custom pieces that incorporated elements of the Harmon tradition while establishing her unique artistic voice. Most significant, though, were the personnel changes. The unexpected family she'd discovered had become the center of her life. Gerald, despite his health challenges, had become the grandfather figure she'd never had. Catherine, initially so guarded, was now a trusted confidant and business partner. And Eleanor had blossomed in her expanded role as family matriarch, her connection to Gerald bringing healing to old wounds neither had expected to address. When Emma arrived at Catherine's Victorian, she found Gerald in the garden, seated on a bench near a newly planted rosebush. There you are, he called as Scout bounded up to greet him. I was beginning to think you'd forgotten our anniversary. Emma smiled, bending to kiss his cheek. How could I forget the day you crashed into my life? Quite literally, Gerald chuckled, making room for her on the bench. I've been thinking about that morning, how many small decisions led to our paths crossing at exactly that moment. If I'd left 5 minutes later, or if you'd driven a different route, double quotes, Emma mused. Or if Catherine hadn't given me the ring, or if you hadn't recognized it, double quotes, Gerald added. A series of unlikely events, Emma agreed, almost too perfect to be coincidence. Gerald's eyes twinkled. Perhaps Catherine had a hand in it from beyond. She always did like to arrange things just so. Emma touched her rose pendant, its twin glinting on the chain around Gerald's neck. The jeweler Anton had done magnificent work, preserving the essence of the original ring while creating two distinct pieces that honored its legacy. The ring found its way back to me, Emma said thoughtfully, just not in the way I expected. Life rarely unfolds as we expect, Gerald observed, gazing at the rosebush with its first summer blooms. That's what makes it interesting. Catherine emerged from the house carrying a tray with lemonade. Are you two getting philosophical out here? Just appreciating life's unexpected turns, Gerald said as she joined them. Catherine poured the lemonade into 3 glasses. I've been thinking about that too. A year ago, I was so suspicious of Emma, so protective of you and our family history. He had reason to be cautious, Emma acknowledged. A stranger suddenly appearing, claiming connection to a valuable heirloom. Still, Catherine said, I'm grateful for how wrong I was. About you, about what your presence in our lives would mean. The genuine warmth in Catherine's voice moved Emma deeply. Their relationship had evolved from wary acquaintances to something akin to sisters, different in many ways but united by shared heritage and purpose. Well, Gerald raised his glass, 2 crashed cars and stolen rings and all the blessings that followed. To family, Emma added, clinking her glass against his. Speaking of family, Catherine said, a hint of excitement in her voice, I have some news. The genealogist I hired found more Parker Harmon connections, distant cousins in Boston and Chicago. There's a whole extended family out there we knew nothing about. Gerald's eyes widened. James's children from his second marriage. Catherine nodded. Their grandchildren, actually. I've made initial contact. They are interested in connecting, learning about our shared history. The family circle widens, Gerald said, clearly pleased. Catherine would have loved that. As they discussed the newly discovered relatives, Eleanor arrived, bringing her famous apple tart for dessert. The conversation flowed easily through dinner, moving from family history to foundation business to plans for Eleanor's upcoming 80th birthday celebration. Later, as the summer evening softened into twilight, they gathered on Catherine's porch. Scout lay contentedly at Gerald's feet, occasionally accepting gentle scratches behind his ears. I've been meaning to ask, Gerald said to Emma during a lull in the conversation. Do you ever regret it, leaving the community center for the foundation? Emma considered the question. I miss aspects of it, she admitted. The direct daily contact with the kids, the sense of being on the front lines. But what we're building with the foundation has broader impact, reaches more young people in the long run. And personally, Gerald pressed, has the change been good for you? Emma looked around at the table, Catherine and Eleanor discussing fall planting, Scout dozing peacefully, Gerald watching her with genuine interest in her happiness. This porch, this moment, these people, they were home in a way she hadn't experienced since her mother died. The best change of my life, she said honestly. I went from feeling alone to being surrounded by family, from questioning my place in the world to understanding my heritage, my connections. Gerald nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. Catherine would be proud of how you've embraced it, all the complications, the history, the future possibilities. I think, Emma said carefully, she somehow knew this would happen, not the specifics, but the reconnection. Why else give you the ring, ask you to tell me the truth? She always had faith in happy endings, Gerald agreed, even when life gave her reasons to doubt. As darkness fell and stars appeared overhead, Emma thought about the journey that had brought them all to this moment, the loves and losses, the secrets and revelations, the ring that had traveled between families for generations before finally bringing them together. Scout stirred at her feet, rising to stretch before settling again closer to Gerald. The dog's easy affection mirrored Emma's own feelings, the natural comfort of belonging, of finding one's rightful place. A year ago, Emma said softly, I pulled a stranger from a crashed car and found my mother's stolen ring on his finger. I thought I was discovering a theft, but instead, you found your way home, Gerald finished, his hand finding hers in the gathering darkness. We all did. In the gentle summer night, surrounded by the family she'd never known she had. Emma felt the truth of his words settle in her heart. The ring that had once seemed lost forever had actually been exactly where it needed to be, all along guiding her toward connections that had been waiting to be discovered. Some things, once lost, find their way back in the most unexpected forms. And sometimes, what appears to be stolen is actually being returned not to where it was, but to where it belongs.